A tool handle can be quite a neat little project. I first learned how to do that when I went to San Antonio to the AAW back in the 90s. And it was a technique that I learned down there and I thought was pretty neat, and I want to share part of that with you. And I want to share a modification to it. How many of you have heard of Bridge City Tool Works? How many have some Bridge City tools? They're exquisite. And they're made out of rosewood and brass, and they're layout tools. And John Economaki is the owner of Bridge City Tool Works, and I bought a couple of his tools because they're just so beautiful. And I saw him at a seminar one time, and I said, "Your tools are so nice. I hardly stand to use them." And he says, "That's what they're for. They're made to use." And John's premise was, the finer the layout tool, the better the tool, the better the project's going to be at the end if you start with something that's really exquisite. And I took that down the road to, yeah?
What's a layout tool?
Well, like something as simple as a scribe. Let's see, trying to think of the different ones. Mortising tools. Yeah, they're basic layout tools. You know, simple prep work, bevel tools, things like that, just so that your angles are all right and everything. And I was so impressed that their quality. And so today we're going to try to emulate that somewhat. And here's a couple of examples of what we can do with a tool. And I was out at the Rosewood shop yesterday, and I was talking with Mike, and I picked up some Coca-Cola for myself, and I said, he said, what could I donate to the club for a raffle? And I said, how about a piece of Coca-Cola for a handle? And that's what he's done back there. Two of the most beautiful pieces of Coca-Cola that will make really nice looking handles. So anyway, that's what we're going to try to do. And I'm a firm believer in your time is valuable, so I am not going to spend a half hour turning a column or cylinder of wood. It's sort of like the Food Network. You know, we start with something like this, and this happens to be a piece of maple. Put it between centers and start turning between centers. Don't use your chuck. Put it between centers and turn it to a cylinder. Yes?
When you, if you know your desired length that you want that
Yeah.
tool handle to be, from your experience, how much longer do you start with?
I start with a couple of inches longer, you know, because it's going to go in here, and I'm going to part it off at the chuck side. I have handouts. I brought 10 handouts for those who are really serious to take them with you. Larry is going to put the handouts on the internet so that all of that will be available. On that handout, it has recommended lengths for various tools. And even though they're provided, I'm not suggesting that you stick with, you know, parting tool 13 inches, detailed gouge, 3/8 of an inch, 12-inch long. Whatever feels right to you, but generally speaking, the bigger the gouge, the bigger the tool, the bigger the handle. It's just what works. And I started out, and back in the 90s, I shouldn't say most, a lot of tools came without handles. That was pretty standard. And you made your own handle. And I got into it, and I made some really nice cherry handles and maple handles and things like that, and just recently started getting into the exotics, which really makes for a very nice looking handle. Then I discovered a metal lathe. A friend of mine had a metal lathe, and I got some bar stock, and I started making these big, heavy steel handles with, you know, I went to Lowe's and got some irrigation tubing to cover them, and they were pretty stout, and I use them for a couple of things. John Telefaro could really identify with them. They're, you know, manly tools. But on the day-to-day, I like using some of the smaller tools. Now, one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting is that I'm trying to learn carbide turning tools. And I do have an Easy Rougher, and I forgot to bring it today. I have learned how to use the Easy Rougher for making the tenon, and it does a very nice job. This is a Hunter tool. Hunter makes very nice tools. This is an $80 tool. And I just wanted to see how that worked. And the tools that I'm handing around, I might have $20 in each of those. And I have a source that I'm going to share with you for the carbide, the nano carbide inserts that you can buy. And they're about $7 each rather than 27 or 23. Yeah, Dan?
That, the carbide tip on that Hunter is about $70 itself.
I don't think so.
Depending on who you buy, you can't pay that much for the...
Yeah. Well, I go right to the Carbide Depot in Birmingham, Alabama, and they're $7 each, but you got to buy 5. And they also provide the screw, and they also will sell you the tap. I suggest you buy 2 taps because they're easy to break when that small. I haven't done that yet. Pardon? It's Carbide Depot. I've got it in the source, and it will be on the internet. And they're very good to deal with, and they're very quick. They'll get it to you within 2 or 3 days. It's a small package, so it comes in the mail. And they provide the taps, the screws, the carbide in 8, 10, and 12 millimeters. And you know, 10 millimeters is very close to 3/8 of an inch. 12 millimeters is very close to a 1/2 inch. And then you go to Shepherd Supply down on Waverly Street, and you can buy the rod. Yeah.
What shape is the?
What shape is it? It's a circle.
Just round.
Yeah. And that's it's a handy little tool. I'm starting to really enjoy what you can do with it. It's so small. But if you use it on a shear cut, it does a real nice job. But $80. One other thing that I want to do today is share with you ideas. If you get, my goal is for you to take just one pearl of wisdom, just one idea that you can apply to your shop that you're not using presently and say, hey, that was a pretty good idea. First idea. This comes in these $10 toolboxes. I hardly ever use it. Harbor Freight makes pretty nice magnets, and it does a real nice job to be able to put your tools on your bed. Another idea, and this is not my original. This one came from a Texas turning club. Guy says, pencils, go to Harbor Freight, buy the cheapest magnets that they have, and glue it on your pencil and stick them all over your shop, because there's nothing more frustrating than your earth or lathe. Pencils on the other side of the shop. All you want to do is make a little mark, so that's handy. This one I particularly like, and this is a version of another idea that a person used clips for paintbrushes and stuff that he got at Lowe's, and he used it to hold his sandpaper. These are the clips that you can get at Ace Hardware that are used for holding brooms and things in the garage and stuff like that. I put them on a piece of wood, and if you're anal, you put down the grit, you know, you're really crazy. But it's so nice that it can sit there, and there's nothing more frustrating than to use a piece of sandpaper and you put it in your tray and you can't find it, it falls on the floor. Is that a 220 grit or is that a 180 grit? You know, and or especially when you get around 400 or 600, you just pull it out of here, use it, put it back in, and it's right there. So just an idea. Yeah?
Well, I do on my sandpaper, I take the magic marker and write the grid on the front face of it.
Yeah, I do that on my disc for sure.
If you didn't have it on there, I'll write it on there.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that you can buy them, and when you open the package, one will have 120 grit, and the rest of them don't have anything on it at all. So, okay, one other quick idea, and I'm going to share this one before I get started, but this is kind of a neat way. I hate sanding. If I can make sanding easy, I'm going to go for that idea. These are sanding belts, okay? And This is Sandy belt. It is really sweet to be able to take this and do things like baseball bats and things where you want to get a nice smooth, where you've got some chisel marks that you want to sand out, and instead of holding the sandpaper like so, it's neat. A piece of plastic fits in here, keeps it comfortable, keeps it out of the way, keeps a nice even pressure. Works on the outside of bowls very nicely too. You get a nice smooth transition. And so I made up some of these. And they're in the co-op. The small one is $3 and the large one is $5. So if anyone's interested, we have them for you. And they use 24-inch belts, which you can pick up at Grizzly, you can pick up at Lowe's, you can pick up just about anywhere. And you can start with 80 grit, 120 grit, 180 grit. Okay, let's get started on a handle. I've been doing enough talking. One of the key ways of putting the handle together is to cut a tenon. And once we cut a tenon, we're going to use a plumbing fixture to slide on to that tenon. And we're going to make the tenon just a little bit bigger than it needs to be so that the teeth inside the plumbing fixture cut into it. And then we're going to put it on with epoxy. Now, what I learned to do in Texas was they make it this way. Now, see if you can see that. That's a long 3/8 inch tenon. And you start with that because it fits over this one right here. And, thank you. And the idea behind that is that you want to put this thing on straight. If it gets cattywampus, you don't want it to be cattywampus, okay? Because this is what happens when it goes cattywampus. You're starting to turn the brass down, and all of a sudden you see that if you stop and look, say, I think those are threads that I see on the other side, because it's basically a pretty thin piece of brass when you're all done. But if it's not on straight, then you have a real issue. If it's off a little bit, when you cut through this brass, it's going to be off a little bit. And what I don't like about this idea is if you turn this, and this is the way it was done in the past, and you put that on there, and you mounted it in your one-way chuck, which is my preferred chuck. And the one-way chuck has the advantage of having both serrated jaws and dovetail jaws. Contrary to popular belief, there are dovetail jaws, size 2, 3, and 4, that you can get for the one-way. And the best part is when you put that in there, the serrated jaws clamp down pretty tight, so it can't twist like it would perhaps in a dovetail jaw. So that you can take that.
Learn to use them right.
I've got them. I brought everything but the kitchen sink. Anyway. Okay. Well, we can do that with a very versatile one-way jaw. We'll make it line up. Okay. Once you clamp that on, and the difficult part of this demo is getting used to another lathe that I don't necessarily work on. And things are in different places. And I can lock mine on, and so I can use both hands to turn this on.
You're threading that plumbing fixture?
That plumbing fixture is going right on. And that's turned just about right because you don't want to have it too loose, and you don't want to get halfway there and get stuck and have to redo it. Okay, once I've checked it and it's going to work fine, then I mix up some epoxy because I don't want that going anywhere. And another little idea that I have for epoxy, I'm always looking for something to mix my epoxy in, you know? A cup or a little thing. These are great. Sam's taco bowls, and you can get about 1,000 of them for I don't know how much. And then the other thing is to, oh, here they are. Okay, this will crack you up. These make great little stirrers. Anybody see what these are? Chopsticks. You know, I read someplace that Springfield has more Chinese restaurants, counting the cashew chicken places, per capita than San Francisco. That's telling you something about Springfield. I particularly like this epoxy that's called Barrel Bond because it has a much longer shelf life because it comes in a tube than some of these others that are kind of open. Now the other little problem here with this particular design is that once you get this on here, and this is that 5-minute stuff, so it works really well. Once you get this on here, there's a kind of a flaw in this design, and that's that you've got to turn off that other tenon. And that's kind of awkward because you've still got it chucked up. Okay, that's on there good and tight. Okay, and then the other thing you have to do is you have to take that off. I don't think that's a very good way to do it. I think there's a better way. All right. This is my idea, or my version. And if you bear with me here, what I did was I figured I've got to have another kind of tenon here. So what makes sense? What do I know that's 3/8 of an inch? How about a bolt? I'm pretty good at making bottle stoppers. So I took this bolt, I put it in my trusty one-way chuck, and I clamped it down, and I took a drill and I put it in the tailstock, brought up and drilled a little tiny hole in the end of the bolt, which will serve as a place for this thing to hook onto. Then I took my cylinder, turned it down, but before I did that, I went ahead and drilled a 11/32 inch hole. And I have this all in the handout. And I use my threader, the 3/8 threader, and threaded this in. So now I have a place to put a bolt. But and then these fixtures aren't all 3/8 all the time. So this is like 1.5 wraps of duct tape. Duct tape is wonderful. I was in Ace Hardware the other day, and you know you're in the Ozarks when you go in there and say, "You got duct tape?" They said, "Sure." I said, "You got camo duct tape?" "Camo? Absolutely." So I haven't bought any camo duct tape, but anyway, you screw that in, and you get that in there, and that serves as your tenon, and it keeps everything straight. And again, you want to turn this one on.
So the first one you showed us is the way you learned it. And
Yeah.
this is your revised.
This is my way of doing it because I want to be able to pull that bolt out of there, and I want to be able to run the tailstock right up to the opening. And I don't have to worry about turning. And I'll tell you, there's nothing more tedious than turning a 3/8 inch tenon and making it 3/8. The Easy tool does a nice job of being able to turn tenons. And again, you want to use your wrench to turn that on. Yeah.
What is the purpose of that outside tenon? Why not just bore the hole where the rod is going in there and bring a tailstock cone into it to be done?
Yeah. This little deal here keeps this straight. And if you take a look at that first thing that I passed around, well, not the first thing, but the one that I did out of zebra wood, where it was cattywampus, I didn't get it straight because I didn't have a guide. I brought the tailstock up, and that will work 90% of the time, or 80% of the time, but it's amazing how little you have to be off for the thing to not work so good. Now this one's coming right up, and it's going to be tight, and it's going to be flush. Okay? Now, I think probably, since I can probably go right to this right now and not have to worry about the epoxy setting up, because it will set, it's going against it, so it's always going to be tightening it. And I can take everything out here. The only reason for that tenon is to keep the brass level and straight and aligned. Now you can bring that right up and tighten it right up on there, like so. All right, now the interesting part about brass, it's a lot softer than you think. And what we're going to do is we're going to carefully break this down a little bit. One thing you definitely, when you're turning brass, you better use eye protection, because these little things flick up all over the place. And when you're sanding it, you should use some kind of a dust mask so the fine brass doesn't get in the way. So let's get down to the turning part of it. Yeah, let's get down to the exciting part here.
When he starts turning that brass, we need to kill the speakers. He says
Yeah, we may have to knock the speakers down because
Les,
sometimes it screeches.
would you be ready to turn that speaker down for him?
Let's just see how it goes. Now, what I do is I make sure this is a little spindle gouge.
You're good.
You good?
You're good.
And I try to do a shear cut and just pick. It's easy to get a catch in there. We want to be careful, but we want to turn this to a cylinder. Then we want to get in here and we want to turn these threads off, because I want to eventually part that back a little bit. As you can see in the one that I handed out.
Blue, is that what, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock?
My sure cut is, 10 to 4. Okay, let's see how this thing works.
You have tailstock locked down, Bob?
That's what I want to make sure.
About what speed are you using?
That was around 600 or 800. It's not real fast, but it's not slow either. I mean,
Metal lathes don't turn that.
no, metal lathes are pretty slow, but this will flick off. We're doing a pretty good job of knocking off the edges, and it's fairly even, so that brass was aligned fairly well.
Do that with mill file ball?
You probably could. I've never have done it that way. I've done it with a bowl gouge. I've done it with carbide, but I just have more control. I feel better with a small pointed little spindle gouge. It's cool. It's not hot. No, it does not. It's amazing. High-speed steel is what you want to use. This is the tedious part, and I don't want to hog it off and have a problem, so that's why I'm sort of taking my time. And this is the only time that you really need to take your time. That was my problem. That's better. Okay. Okay, we're not there yet, but we're darn close. And I think probably what I can do right now is probably go to an aluminum oxide sandpaper and get the rest of those little imperfections out of there. Yeah.
I'm a little confused.
Okay.
I turn it down, slick a brass deal over there and drill a hole in it, stick the thing in, and that's it.
Yeah.
What is it that you're doing here?
Well, the advantage of this is that you can have a nice transition, and you'll have another piece of brass that will come out a little ways to finish the tool and to make it look like it's all sort of flows, especially in those tools that I handed out. Rather than have a brass ring and wood and a tool sticking out, it's just one more finesse.
If you have a metal lathe, why don't you turn it on a metal lathe?
I don't have a metal lathe. No, I had access to one, and he moved away, unfortunately.
Because you use these lathes.
I like his lathe. Yeah. You know, Abernet is a really neat product because it's almost like using a cheese grater. You can see it coming through.
Can you change hands on that?
Yeah. Let me. Believe it or not, there's a little bit of brass dust floating out and about. Okay. Here's some 400. All right. I know this is the tedious, kind of boring part, and I'm almost finished with that. But you can come in and get a close shot of that. It'll give you an idea how that finishes out. And what I'd do is, on this one, I would go ahead and cut off those threads, and then I would part that right there. And when you part it, get ready and do it very carefully. I'm not going to spend the time because I want to get to this other one too. But when you part it, you can feel it. You can feel the thing parting off, and you want to stop before it comes completely off.
You use a parting tool? Or?
Yeah, I use a regular parting tool. And what I use is my least expensive parting tool. All right? And you go in and you cut right through it. And then after you've done that, one other thing that I do that I think is pretty neat. I was going to turn one of these for you, but I'm just going to show it to you. This is a nice aluminum, unit, and I hate to screw that up, but I don't have any problem messing up a wooden one. And as you recall, I think I demonstrated how to turn those and how to whip those together with a bolt. I put the bolt in here in your trusty one-way chuck. And you can slam that up in there and tighten it in. And then when you're finessing it, after you cut it, it's going to be up here, you can go in and you can cut right into that wood and everything, and you're not going to mess up this. I mean, you can make a jillion of these for next to nothing. And it does a nice job of the finesse, finessing part. The final thing that you want to do to that to put a wicked neat finish on it is flitz. I don't know if you've used a metal polish like flitz, but
Where do you get that stuff?
I don't know. I used to buy it locally, and I can't find it hardly anywhere. Flitz. Brasso is good. the stuff that comes with the Tormac.
Any rubbing compound.
Yeah.
Automotive mixers will work too.
What's medium polishing about?
Oh, about 600, 700. See how it turns black? One thing you don't want to do is wrap it around you. Now, there's that nifty mirror finish, and you get that with that polishing compound. The other, the other thing I would do when I made this, I'd knock that shoulder off and make it nice and smooth, so there's a nice transition. But you can see how bright and shiny that is. Just makes a nice finished piece. What I do is I also like to try to emulate the Sorby design, and I like that because it's a good grip for me. Now this is one thing that's really important. Women have hands that are smaller than men's usually, and so you can make a custom grip that's going to be something that's going to fit your hand, something you're going to be comfortable with, and you don't have to manhandle something really big. So anyway, with that, I'll make a little bit of a mess here. Okay. I'm really good at a shear cut and a scraping cut just to get the basic look. Anyway, that's the gist of it. And of course you'd run it all the way down. And that's where these sanding things come in really handy. And I won't learn it for very long because I don't want to make a mess here. But you can see how that just rides up and around. I mean, you can get the same effect by holding a couple pieces of sandpaper. But that does a real nice job of leveling all of that stuff out.
Safer.
It's a lot safer, it's easier to handle. Now, let me jump ahead and talk about a couple of key things that you need to do when you get ready to put your blade, and it's called a blade, into your handle. Now what I do is I will drill, I'll take if I'm going to use a 3/8, and for some reason the 3/8 is just a hair, just a hair bigger than 3/8. I don't know what the deal is, but if I drill that with a 3/8 inch drill, it gets to be really hard to put it in. And there's nothing worse than having the thing get stuck halfway, and I don't like that. I'd rather have the latitude of using some epoxy and setting it in at my leisure. Now, what is really cool, what you do after you drill, and this is an excuse for you to go out and buy one of those cheap, made in China, 115-bit drill bit collections, because it has the alphabet drill, and a V is just a little bit bigger than 3/8. And so a V-bit is what I use to drill down here. Now, the next thing that's important to remember, and this is what I do, is I've measured down almost to the bottom of that. I've measured down almost to the bottom of the hole that I've got in here. And I make a mark with my pencil, you know, where that's going to be. And then I go in and I'll make a couple little marks. If you'll notice, the Hunter tool has 3 marks. Mine only has 2, so maybe that makes a difference between $20 and $80. All right? Now, another little pearl of wisdom. These are those balls with the wire things. This is a hacksaw. I don't like to be close to the wire wrapped around my hands or anything in case something happens. This is a really safe way of burning. I saw something on the internet that just blew me away. Somebody had a coat hanger wrapped around both hands. Man. Well, I've cranked that up to about 1,600. All right, the reason why I'm doing this is that I'm going to take a drill, and in this case, I usually use an electric drill, but I use a real tiny bit, and I'll drill a hole in one of these, and I'll try to line it up with the grain maybe, so it becomes a little more invisible. And what that hole will do is relieve the pressure of the epoxy and everything going into this. Because if you don't, you put the blade in and oops, it just comes right out again, because you can't believe how much pressure is built up. But that little hole will allow it to release it. Sometimes the epoxy will come out of that. You just have to wipe it all off. Then when that is all done and you finish this thing, then you need to put a finish on. I have some instructions for Bob's Rotten Polish, and it's a mixture of beeswax, carnauba, and some rotten stone and some turpentine. And that works pretty neat. It's a kind of a neat little finish, and it will turn lighter woods fairly dark because of the rotten stone. But it leaves it smooth, but it's still tacky enough, and it feels pretty good. And that's what I used on those that are floating around. Another polish or another finish is a Triple E, which is pretty good stuff. And probably the best thing though is like water locks. Let the thing hang up to dry for a day or so, then take it to the Beal system and buff it out and finish it off. When you get ready to part this off, it's really something not very scary, because you're parting it off at the drive end, and what's going to happen, the thing's going to fall down. Hopefully your hand's there to catch it as it falls. Often or not, the floor is there to definitely catch it. And so you want to be careful. Okay. Any questions about the tool handle? Yeah.
After you polish it, did you put, you were talking about using that rotten stone, did you put any varnish in there?
No. Nothing.
Really good.
Yeah. It's pretty decent, and it leaves a nice finish, and it's a tool, and you want it to be something that's not going to slip in your hands all the time, and you're not looking for something that is a work of art that you're not going to use. But you're looking for something elegant and something nice and something you're proud of and something you say, well, I made that. And it's a whole lot better than a $5 handle from Craft Supplies. So any question about that? I don't want to run over, and I do have something I really want to share with you. Okay?